Somewhere over the Nevada desert, a helicopter drops low over a band of wild horses and drives them into a panicked run. The Mustangs gallop for miles across the sagebrush, dust boiling up behind them until they're funneled through a hidden chute into a steel trap. From there, they're loaded onto trucks and hauled away, many of them never to run free again. This is how America manages its wild horses. And it is staggeringly expensive. Every year, the federal government spends roughly $150 million on its wild horse program, and around 2/3 of that money goes to a single purpose: paying to feed and house more than 60,000 horses that have already been pulled off the range and locked in holding pens, in some cases for the rest of their natural lives. The official reason is simple. There are too many wild horses, the land can't support them, and they have no natural predators to keep their numbers in check. So we do it ourselves with helicopters and trucks, and an almost unimaginable pile of taxpayer money. There's just one problem with that story. On a single mountain range on the California-Nevada border, a scientist spent years studying a wild horse herd that nobody ever had to round up. It never overran its range. It never needed a helicopter, because something else was keeping it in perfect balance, something that did the job for free and had been doing it long before we ever showed up. In 1971, Congress passed a law declaring wild horses and burros to be living symbols of the historic spirit of the West, and made it the government's job to protect them. The Bureau of Land Management now manages these animals across roughly 25 million acres of public land in 10 western states. And on paper, it has a real problem. Wild horse herds can grow by about 20% a year, which means a population can nearly double in just 4 or 5 years. With no large predators across most of that land, the agency argues, the herds explode, strip the range bare, and outcompete everything else for water and grass, including the cattle that ranchers graze on the same public land. So the agency's answer for decades has been to round them up and remove them. The trouble is that the math has turned into a money pit. There are now more than 70,000 wild horses on the range, against a target the BLM calls the appropriate management level of fewer than 27,000. To close that gap, the agency keeps removing horses faster than it can find homes for them, and the holding pens keep filling. By the agency's own figures, caring for a single unadopted horse over its lifetime costs around $48,000, and the animals already in holding could run taxpayers close to $1 billion before they're done. Each year, the helicopters pull roughly 16,000 more animals off the land, and the roundups themselves draw fierce criticism because panicked horses crash into fences and each other, and some are hurt so badly they have to be put down. The whole program has been called costly, inefficient, and ineffective by the National Academy of Sciences, by the Government Accountability Office, and by the government's own Inspector General, which makes that one mountain range where none of this was necessary a very inconvenient place. Because what was controlling the horses there wasn't a helicopter or a budget, it was a cat. In 1985, a biologist named John Turner started studying a wild horse herd at a place called Montgomery Pass, high in the mountains on the line between California and Nevada. At the time, the Forest Service was planning to cut that herd down from about 190 animals to 75, the usual approach, remove the excess before they overgraze. But as Turner watched the herd, something didn't add up. The foals kept dying. Across most of the Great Basin, around 90% of wild horse foals survived their first year. At Montgomery Pass, only about 1/4 to 40% of them made it to their first birthday. Something was killing the young horses, year after year, with brutal consistency. And when Turner figured out what it was, it changed the entire picture. It was mountain lions. at least 5 of them, hunting the herd, and they were targeting the foals almost exclusively. Turner's team logged 5,000 hours in the field, and in all that time, they actually witnessed a lion take a foal only once. Mountain lions are ghosts, but the evidence was everywhere, in the tracks, in the kills, in the survival numbers. And it revealed something strange about horses themselves. When a lion attacks, the adult horses don't form a protective ring around their young, the way bison or elk do. They scatter, they run. Flight is the weapon evolution handed the horse. And for a grown animal, it works beautifully, because a healthy horse can usually outrun a cougar. But a foal that hasn't learned to run yet is left exposed. And so, every spring and summer, the lions took the new foals. And that alone was enough to hold the entire herd steady. No removals, no roundups, no holding pens, no cost. In a follow-up study that tracked the herd for 11 years, Turner and a colleague found that at least 82% of all foal deaths were mountain lion kills, and that barely 1 in 4 foals survived its first year. Their conclusion was blunt. The growth of this horse population was being limited by predation, full stop. The range wasn't overpopulated, Turner said. The mountain lions had it under control. And Montgomery Pass, it turned out, was not a one-time fluke. When other researchers went looking across the Great Basin, what they found was even more striking. In 2021, scientists from the University of Nevada, Reno, published a study that did something nobody had really done before. They put tracking collars on 13 mountain lions living in the Great Basin and recorded exactly what they were eating. The results were astonishing. Across those cats, roughly 60% of their entire diet was wild horses. 10 of the 13 lions were killing horses as their main prey. These weren't cougars occasionally grabbing a stray foal. These were predators that had made wild horses the center of their lives. The study even found a fascinating split between the sexes. The female lions killed horses of all ages, year-round, adults included. The males tended to take foals in the spring and summer, then switch to deer in the winter. In other words, in the right conditions, mountain lions don't just nibble at the edges of a horse herd. They can become specialists, living on horse meat and pushing hard against the population. Exactly the thing the government spends $150 million a year trying to do. Which raises the obvious, uncomfortable question. If mountain lions can do this, why aren't they doing it across the whole West? Why is there a herd at Montgomery Pass being quietly managed for free, while a few hundred miles away, the helicopters are flying? Part of the answer is money and where it flows. When advocacy groups dug through the federal contracts, they found that over the last decade, the overwhelming majority of the BLM's roundup and holding contracts, by one analysis, nearly 90%, went to ranching and livestock operators, the very industry that competes with wild horses for grass on public land. The companies that fly the helicopters and the ones that run the holding corrals have collected hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other part of the answer is US directly. Because while one branch of the government spends that $150 million rounding up horses, a different federal program spends well over $100 million a year doing the exact opposite, killing predators. The Department of Agriculture runs a wildlife control operation that lethally removes mountain lions, along with wolves and coyotes, in large part to protect the livestock. On top of that, mountain lions are legally hunted across most of the western states. So on much of the range where wild horses run, the one animal that hunts them for free has been deliberately thinned out for generations. We removed the predator. Then we acted shocked that the prey exploded. And then we sent in the helicopters and the bill to do the predator's job. But before you decide the cougar is the obvious fix, the science is just as clear about something else, and it complicates everything. Mountain lions are not a magic switch you can flip across the West. The same body of research that shows what they did at Montgomery Pass also shows the limits, plainly. The cats overwhelmingly take foals. When you add it all up, adult and yearling horses make up less than a third of the horses that lions kill. And newer modeling that asks whether mountain lion predation could actually control horse populations across the wider landscape lands on a sobering answer that in most places, on its own, it probably can't. Montgomery Pass worked because of a specific recipe: rugged, broken terrain that gives a stalking cat cover, tight spots near water where horses are forced to gather, and enough lions to do the work. Out on the wide open flats where many wild horses live, a healthy adult horse simply outruns a lion, and a handful of cats can't keep pace with a herd growing 20% a year. Lion numbers are limited too, by their own territories, by hunting, and by the simple fact that a kicking, half-ton horse can badly injure or even kill the cat trying to bring it down. There are gentler tools in this fight too, and they're part of the argument. Advocates point to a fertility-controlled dart that keeps mares from breeding, a method they say is humane and far cheaper than roundups, and they accuse the agency of spending almost nothing on it. The BLM answers that birth control alone can't bring the herds down fast enough, that with horses multiplying this quickly, darting is like bailing a boat with a teaspoon. That fight is still raging, in courtrooms and in Congress with no end in sight. So the honest truth lands in an uncomfortable middle. In the right place, mountain lions really do, for free, what costs the government a fortune, and we have spent decades killing the very predator that could help. But they were never going to solve the whole thing alone, and after years of letting the herds grow across millions of acres of open ground, the problem may simply be too big for cats to fix. And underneath all of it sits the strangest fact in this entire story, one that scrambles the usual idea of who belongs here and who doesn't. The horse is not a foreigner to this land. Horses evolved in North America. They ran across these very plains for millions of years, hunted by American lions and cheetahs that have since vanished. Then, around 10,000 years ago, horses went extinct on this continent, and the land lost them completely, until the Spanish brought them back a few centuries ago. So the wild Mustang is something genuinely in between. Not quite native, not quite invader, a returning ghost on its old home range. And the mountain lion is the last great predator left out there that still remembers how to hunt it. We pulled the predators out, we put the prey back in, and we have been paying for that imbalance in helicopters and holding pens and hundreds of millions of dollars ever since. So here's the question this whole story leaves on the table, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Should the United States keep spending $150 million a year chasing wild horses with helicopters and warehousing tens of thousands of them in pens for life? Or should we protect more mountain lions and let the oldest balance in the West do part of the job for free, even knowing it will never be enough everywhere, and that ranchers and hunters will fight it every step of the way? There's no clean answer here. Real people who love these animals and this land on opposite sides of it. And that's exactly why I want to know where you stand. And if stories like this one, where the simple version falls apart the moment you look closely, are the kind of thing you're here for, then subscribe and stick around. There are far more of them than you would ever guess.